I survived it. That's the first thing I want you to know, because when I think back to that weekend in Whistler, to the moment I woke up on a stranger's couch with my phone missing and a half-empty glass of wine on the coffee table in front of me, survival felt like the least certain thing in my world. My name is Serena. No, wait, I need to stop starting stories that way. Let me try again. I am 31 years old. I work as a forensic accountant for a mid-sized firm in Vancouver, which means I spend most of my days looking for the exact moment a number stopped telling the truth. I am very good at my job. I say this not to brag. I say it because it matters to what happened next. My boyfriend at the time, I'll call him my boyfriend because that's what he was, even if his family never quite accepted that word. His name was Owen. We'd been together for 2 years and 3 months when his parents invited us to their chalet in Whistler for Thanksgiving weekend. Owen's family owns 3 properties in BC and a condo in Florida that his mother calls the warm place, as if naming it would make her sound less wealthy than she is. They're old money in the way that Canadian old money works, quietly, efficiently, and with a lot of real estate. I grew up in Scarborough. My mom is a PSW. My dad drove a delivery truck for 22 years. I worked 2 jobs through Ryerson and graduated with distinction in accounting. I am not ashamed of any of that. But Owen's mother, I'll call her his mother because that's the only name she ever deserved from me, made sure I never forgot the distance between Scarborough and West Vancouver. The first time I met her, she asked me what neighborhood I grew up in. When I told her, she said, "Oh, how resilient of you," and turned back to her wine. Owen laughed it off. He always laughed things off, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The Thanksgiving invitation felt significant. Owen said his parents wanted to get to know me properly. His sister, I'll call her his sister, texted me something warm and welcoming, asking what my dietary restrictions were, saying she was so excited to finally spend real time together. I read that text probably 4 times. I wanted to believe it. We drove up on the Friday evening. The chalet sat at the edge of a tree line, the kind of place you see in architectural magazines and assume belongs to someone who inherited it, which in this case was exactly right. Owen's parents were on the deck when we arrived. His father shook my hand once and went back inside. His mother air-kissed me and said I looked very put together. His sister hugged me and told me my jacket was cute. I told myself this is fine. People take time to warm up. Dinner that first night was pleasant enough on the surface. They talked about the property market in Kelowna. They talked about Owen's cousin's upcoming wedding in Portugal. They talked about a family ski trip to Verbier the previous February. I asked questions and listened and refilled my own wine glass because no one offered. Owen sat beside me but talked mostly across the table. At one point, his mother looked at me and said, "Serena, Owen tells us you're an accountant. Forensic accounting, yes, how interesting." She said it the way people say how unusual when they mean how beneath us. His sister changed the subject. After dinner, Owen's father opened a second bottle of red, something from the Okanagan that cost more than my grocery budget for a month, and poured 4 glasses at the kitchen island. Owen was in the bathroom. His sister was out on the deck taking a call. His mother handed me a glass and said something about how I must find their lifestyle quite different from what I was used to. I took 1 sip, just one. I remember setting the glass down on the granite counter. I remember the fireplace crackling. I remember thinking the room felt suddenly very warm. I don't remember anything after that. I woke up on the sectional sofa in the living room. The fire had burned low. The room was dark except for the glow from the kitchen. My mouth tasted metallic and my head felt packed with wet cotton. I sat up slowly and looked around. My phone was on the coffee table, screen down. My wine glass was sitting nearby, wiped clean, and my cardigan, the one I'd been wearing all evening, was buttoned wrong. 3 buttons off by 1 the whole way down, the collar sitting crooked at my neck. I sat very still for a moment. I had buttoned that cardigan myself that morning. I am a forensic accountant. I noticed things. I picked up my phone. The screen showed 2:14 a.m. There was a notification from my banking app that I hadn't triggered. Your account was accessed from a new device at 11:47 p.m. There was a second one. 9 minutes later, your TD EasyWeb password was successfully reset. My hands were steady. I don't know why. I think some part of me had already understood what was happening before the rest of me caught up. I didn't wake anyone. I went upstairs to the guest room where Owen was asleep, fully clothed, on top of the covers, which struck me as strange. I lay down beside him and stared at the ceiling for the rest of the night. In the morning, I told Owen I wasn't feeling well and asked if we could leave after breakfast. He said of course and looked genuinely concerned, which confused me more than anything. I kept watching his face for something, guilt, relief, a flicker of knowing. and saw only what looked like real worry. Either he was a better actor than I'd given him credit for, or he had no idea what his family had done. I still don't know which one is worse. Back in Vancouver, I went straight to a walk-in clinic on East Hastings and asked for a blood panel. I told the doctor I suspected I had been given something without my consent 2 nights ago. She was calm and professional and didn't make me feel like I was being dramatic. The results came back 6 days later, trace amounts of a benzodiazepine that I had not been prescribed, that I had never taken recreationally, and that I had certainly not put in my own drink. I have that report. I will come back to it. While I was waiting for those results, I spent every evening at my kitchen table with my laptop and a notepad, working backward from the banking notification. Someone had accessed my TD app from a device that was not mine. They had reset my password, which meant they'd had access to my email long enough to intercept the verification code, which meant they'd either had my phone or remote access to it. They had not successfully transferred any funds. The daily limit verification had stopped them, but they had accessed my account. They had looked at everything. I have a TFSA, a joint savings account I share with my mother for emergencies, and a separate account that holds a trust disbursement from my grandfather's estate. Not a large amount, but not nothing. Someone at that chalet had wanted to know exactly what I had. I thought about what Owen had told his family about me over 2 years. I thought about how his mother had asked about my job. I thought about his father's handshake, quick, assessing, like a man estimating the value of something he might want to buy. Then I started thinking about Owen's sister. She was the one who'd been on the deck when the wine was poured. She had come back inside maybe 15 minutes after I sat down on that sectional. Her phone call, she said, had been with a friend in Toronto. But she'd been the one handling dinner. She'd been the one refilling drinks all evening. She'd been attentive in a way that had felt warm at the time and now felt like something else entirely. And she was the one who, 2 weeks after the Whistler trip, sent me a LinkedIn message, not a text, a LinkedIn message, asking if I'd be open to chatting about some consulting opportunities that her father's company was exploring. She mentioned they were in the process of restructuring some financial arrangements. She mentioned it would be confidential. She mentioned that my particular expertise in forensic accounting might be very useful to the family. I read that message 3 times, then I screenshotted it and sent it to my personal email. Owen called me that same evening, cheerful, unaware, talking about a hockey game he'd watched with a colleague. I told him I was tired. I said goodnight. I sat in my apartment in the dark for a long time. Here is what I knew by that point. I had been drugged at his family's property. My bank account had been accessed without my permission. His sister had now approached me about confidential financial work for the family. The dots were not subtle. Here is what I did not yet know, how deep it went, and whether Owen was part of it. I called my closest friend, she's a paralegal, and I told her everything. Not over the phone. I drove to her apartment in Mount Pleasant and sat at her kitchen table and told her from the beginning while she took notes on a yellow legal pad. By the end, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You need to document everything before you do anything else." I already had, but I kept going. I responded to Owen's sister's LinkedIn message, carefully, warmly, saying I'd be happy to hear more. She suggested a call. I suggested meeting in person instead. Easier to discuss something sensitive, I said. She agreed immediately, which told me she wasn't suspicious of me at all. We met at a cafe in Kitsilano on a Thursday afternoon. I got there 20 minutes early and chose a seat with my back to the wall and a clear sightline to the door. I wore a blazer with a small digital recorder in the breast pocket, the kind investigators use, the size of a USB drive. I had it running before she sat down. She was warm. She was polished. She ordered a matcha latte and spoke to the barista by name. She told me how much the family admired my background and my tenacity, and I noticed she used the same kind of language her mother had, words that complimented the distance I'd traveled without acknowledging what that distance meant about where they sat. Then she told me what they needed. Her father, she explained, had a business associate who was under CRA audit. The audit had flagged irregularities in a series of numbered companies, shell structures, she said, that had been set up years ago and were a bit complicated. The family needed someone with forensic accounting experience to review the documentation and prepare a report that would satisfy the auditors. Someone outside the firm, someone discreet. She looked at me over her matcha and smiled. "We'd compensate you very well," she said, "and of course this would stay between us." I asked a few careful questions. I kept my voice interested, even a little flattered. Inside, I felt something cold and clarifying settle across my chest, the feeling I get when a spreadsheet finally shows me exactly where the fraud is. What she was describing was not consulting. What she was describing was obstruction. The numbered companies she referenced, the irregularities the outside report prepared to satisfy rather than to accurately represent. That was evidence tampering adjacent to tax fraud, which in Canada carries serious criminal exposure. She was asking me to help her father's associate evade a CRA audit. She was asking me to do it quietly, for cash, with no paper trail. And she had chosen me specifically because I was the forensic accountant dating her brother. Someone they had assessed, someone they believed they knew, someone they thought they could manage. I think about that word a lot, manage. I thanked her for thinking of me. I said I'd need a few days to consider whether I had capacity. She touched my hand across the table and said, "I knew you'd be the right person." She left first. I waited until I could no longer see her through the cafe window. Then I took the recorder out of my blazer and pressed stop. I sat there with a cold coffee and listened to the whole thing again on an earbud with the volume low. Then I called my paralegal friend and told her I needed the name of a good criminal defense lawyer. Not for me, but so I'd know exactly who I would be speaking to if this became something I needed to report. She gave me a name. I called him that same evening. His name doesn't matter, but he practices in Vancouver and he has 20 years of experience with CRE-adjacent cases. I told him everything. He was quiet for a moment and then said, "You have more than most people come in with." He helped me understand my options. I could go to the CRA's Criminal Investigations Division directly. I could go to the RCMP. Or I could do both, in that order, and bring everything I had. The blood panel, the banking notifications, the LinkedIn message, the recording. There was one more thing I needed, Owen. I had been avoiding the question of Owen for weeks. Every time I turned it over, I put it back down. But the lawyer was right, his position in all of this mattered. If he was complicit, knowing would protect me. If he wasn't, he deserved to know what his family had done in his name. I called him and asked if we could meet. He suggested dinner. I suggested a walk instead. Stanley Park, the seawall, somewhere open. He said sure, thought nothing of it. We met on a Saturday afternoon. It was early November, the kind of Vancouver gray that feels like the sky is thinking very hard about something. We walked for a while without talking much, which Owen interpreted as me being pensive, which I was, but not in the way he assumed. Then I told him. I did it carefully. I told him about waking up on the sofa, about the cardigan, about the banking notifications, about the blood panel results. I watched his face the whole time. He stopped walking. The expression that moved across his face was not guilt. It was not the small collapse of someone caught. It was something closer to a man hearing a sound he can't immediately locate. Confusion, then alarm, then something that looked very much like horror. "That can't," he started, then stopped, then, "The wine, yes." He sat down on a bench without seeming to choose to. "And the bank. Someone accessed it from a device at the Chalet. At 11:47, you were asleep." He was quiet for a long time. A cyclist went past. A dog pulled its leash toward the water. "My sister," he said finally. Not a question. I didn't answer. He put his face in his hands. "She asked me a few months ago if you had money. I told her it wasn't her business. She said she was just asking." He looked up. I didn't think anything of it. I believed him. I know some people would say I was naive to believe him, and maybe they're right. But I have spent 10 years reading financial records and I know when something doesn't add up, and Owen's reaction didn't add up to someone who knew. It added up to someone being told the truth for the first time. I told him about the meeting with his sister. I told him about the recording. I did not play it for him. That felt important. I was not going to give him the chance to warn anyone, even unconsciously, even unintentionally. He asked what I was going to do. I told him I had already spoken to a lawyer. He nodded slowly, like someone adjusting to altitude. "Okay," he said. "Okay. We didn't break up that day. We didn't stay together much longer either, but that's a different story." 2 weeks later, I submitted everything to the CRA Criminal Investigations Division. My lawyer accompanied me. We brought the blood panel, the banking records, the LinkedIn message printed and time-stamped, and the audio recording from the cafe. The investigator who met with us was thorough and professional and took 90 minutes with us. The referral to the RCMP came later that month. What happened after that moved slowly, the way these things do in Canada. I was told not to discuss the matter publicly, and I didn't. I told only 3 people, including my mother, who cried on the phone and then said, "I knew there was something wrong with that woman," meaning Owen's mother, which made me laugh for the first time in weeks. But there was one more thing. Owen's father had a business dinner scheduled in late November, A fundraiser event at a hotel ballroom in downtown Vancouver, one of those charity galas with round tables and a silent auction and speeches from people who have already decided the evening's outcome before it begins. Owen's family had a table. There were perhaps 200 people in the room. I was not invited. But Owen was, and Owen asked me to be his guest. His family didn't know he'd asked me. His mother, when she saw me walk in with him, went a particular shade of composed that I recognized as suppressed fury. I wore a green dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion. I had my phone in my clutch with every document saved to cloud backup. I was calm in the way you are calm when you have already done everything that needs to be done. The evening proceeded normally for perhaps an hour. Cocktails, appetizers, a short speech about the foundation being honored. Then Owen's father stood up at his table to say a few words, apparently a tradition, apparently expected, and while he was speaking, mid-sentence, 2 RCMP officers and a plainclothes investigator came through the side door. I had not coordinated the timing. I want to be clear about that. I had nothing to do with when they chose to execute the warrant. It happened to be that evening, and I happened to be in the room. Owen's father stopped speaking. The room went very still in the way rooms go still when 200 people simultaneously realize something is not part of the program. Owen's sister was at the table. She looked up and saw the officers, and then she looked across the room, scanning, I think, for a way to understand what was happening, and her eyes found me. I don't know what she saw on my face. I tried not to show her anything. Owen's mother put her hand on the table very carefully, like someone making sure the ground was still there. One of the officers addressed Owen's father by name, asked him to step away from the table. It was quiet and professional. It took less than 3 minutes. By the time it was over, the room was making noise again, that particular uncertain hum of people who want to pretend they haven't just seen what they saw. Owen sat beside me with his hands flat on the white tablecloth. His father walked out through the side door. His mother did not look up. I drank a glass of water. I ate the salmon that was placed in front of me. I stayed until the dessert course. If you are thinking that the gala ballroom was an uncomfortable place to be after all of that, you would be right. But I had spent a very long time being uncomfortable in rooms where that family made me feel like a guest who hadn't quite earned their seat. That night I was the most comfortable person at the table, and I was done pretending otherwise. Owen's father is currently navigating the CRA process with his legal team. The charge related to what his sister asked me to do, the obstruction, the manipulation of audit documentation, added a separate layer. I don't know every detail of where that stands, and I'm not legally permitted to discuss it further. What I can tell you is this. I went to the walk-in clinic on East Hastings with a banking notification and a crooked cardigan and a very specific kind of fury, and I was taken seriously, and the test confirmed what I already knew. I met with a paralegal and a lawyer and 2 government investigators, and every single time I walked in with documentation and walked out with next steps. I did not tip anyone off. I did not confront anyone without backup. I did not give anyone the chance to prepare. The blood test results are in a folder on my desk. The audio recording is saved in 3 places. The LinkedIn message is printed, dated, and filed. I kept everything. They thought they were assessing me at that dinner table. They thought they were measuring what I had, what I could be convinced to do, how far I'd come from Scarborough, and how grateful I might be for the opportunity to get a little closer to where they sat. What they forgot, what people like that always forget, is that forensic accountants know exactly how to follow the money. And we know how to wait until we have everything we need before we make a single move. I still live in Vancouver. I still do the work I love. I got a promotion in February, actually, senior forensic analyst, the role I'd been working toward for 3 years. Owen and I ended things quietly without anger sometime in January. He texted me on my birthday in March. I haven't responded yet. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. Some columns just don't balance, no matter how long you sit with them, and eventually you close the file. But I'll tell you what I don't do anymore. I don't second-guess what I felt that morning on that sofa. I don't wonder if I was being too sensitive or too suspicious or too quick to assume the worst. I don't tell myself that maybe the cardigan was my own mistake, that maybe I'd just had too much wine, that maybe the banking notification was a coincidence. I am very good at my job, and I knew.